So, why am I playing Castlevania 4 and not 3? Because, in the PAL regions, 4 came out first. Insane, I know, especially since Castlevania 3 came out a good 2 years earlier than 4 in Japan. Our game releases back then didn't really have any logic. If you look at this magazine ad from around the time of Castlevania 4's release, you'll see that it advertises the first and second game, but the third is nowhere to be seen. That would arrive the following month. So, with Castlevania 4...
I'm super, thanks for asking!
It seems to be a retelling of the first game's story, with vampire hunter Simon Belmont taking the leading role once again. Castlevania 3, of course, featured other lead characters, but we'll get to that another time. Any of the RPG or story elements introduced by the previous couple of games in the series were pretty much thrown out the door here, and Castlevania 4 is a straight-up action game. Apart from the wonderful graphical upgrade and fantastically atmospheric music, the main difference I found was Simon's whip. Hurrah that he's now learnt how to whip in different directions, up, down, around, it's a much more versatile weapon. There's still a good selection of sub-weapons as well, but I pretty much stuck with the cross boomerang once I had it. I wouldn't say that Castlevania is a particularly difficult game, but it's certainly an unforgiving one. Unfortunately, Simon is still slow and awkward to control. He's not quite as bad as he used to be, but he's no Mario or Sonic. I've died so many times over the years playing this game. It can be really frustrating when you find yourself dying over and over again when it's really not your fault. Still, practice makes perfect, and if you keep on trying and keep on dying, you'll eventually find yourself face to face with the head vampire himself, Count Dracula. Castlevania 4 is considered a Super Nintendo classic, and for good reason. Apart from its frustrating gameplay, it still manages to be engrossing and fun, and there's always the wonder of what's up ahead. It's beautifully presented, and there really is a sense of a journey as Simon goes through all these different environments, leading all the way up to Dracula's castle. It still stands the test of time. In a couple of weeks, I'll see if the third game fares as well. Again, number 4? What about the other ones? Well, the other 3 Ninja Turtle games were on the NES. The first one was notoriously terrible. The second one was a port of the arcade game that I used to love, but it was pretty terrible too. The third one, which never came out in Australia, was actually fairly decent, a good facsimile of the arcade style. But I think by the time it came out, the Turtles craze had well and truly passed, and most kids just didn't really care much anymore. So that brings us to Ninja Turtles 4, which is a port of the second arcade machine, Turtles in Time. The story could be something straight out of the cartoons. Krang has stolen the Statue of Liberty, so the Turtles chase down Shredder in the Technodrome, where he sends them into a time warp and they travel across history, trying to reach 1992 again. The cool thing about this game is that all 4 of the Turtles actually control quite differently. You could pick Donatello for his long-reaching bow staff, but he's nowhere near as fast as Raphael, who has to fight close and personal. The manual details all of the Turtles' stats, though it's strange that they're nowhere to be found in the actual game. Apart from the seemingly endless supply of foot soldiers, the levels are nice and varied, both in setting and challenge. There was even a funky Mode 7 level added for the Super Nintendo port. The game is good, mindless, beat-em-up fun, and even better with another person. But it's short. Boy, it's short. Have a look at this, what I got after beating the final boss. The entire game took me 33 minutes to play through. The good thing about short games, of course, is that it's all the more encouraging to play again, and I'm always happy to have a play of this, especially with a second player. It's just fun, and definitely one of Konami's best arcade games. It stands. Oh, and let's just not speak of that horrible remake. Now for something a little different. Without a doubt, the best Super Nintendo magazine of the early 90s was Super Play. What made Superplay so amazing, I hear you ask? Well, I'll tell you. First of all, although the magazine was British, it focused on the Super Nintendo from a global perspective. That meant always being up to date with what was happening in Japan and the US. Oh, and our forgotten and belated little PAL territory. The magazine had a distinct anime flavour, and every cover had an excellent illustration by Will Overton. I collected quite a number of the magazines back in the day, and I've managed to snag some recently from eBay as well. My collection is still far from complete though, so if anybody happens to have one lying around that they don't want anymore, let me know. I might be missing that issue. Anyway, I'm starting up a new section of the blog. Each week I'll place some quotes from the magazine from an issue from around the time the current games were released. This week I'm looking at issue 2, which was released in November-December 92. In this issue, guest writer Peter Molyneux, yes, that Peter Molyneux, wrote a report on his visit to the Nintendo show in Japan. In other news, some parents took Nintendo to court for overpricing games. To see more of these golden nuggets of nostalgia, check out the blog. So next week, we've got something original, something experimental, and something that's neither. Peaceus Autius.